The first time Captain Sarah Chen saw the creature, she thought her sensors were malfunctioning. Nothing that large should move so quietly through space. The alien ship stretched nearly 3 kilometers from bow to stern, its hull covered in what looked like organic armor plating that shifted and rippled like living skin. Dark energy readings pulsed from within its core, and every scanner on her exploration vessel screamed warnings about unknown radiation signatures. "Should we retreat, Captain?" Lieutenant Rodriguez asked, his voice tight with fear. The entire bridge crew stared at the massive vessel through the viewport, watching as it slowly turned toward their much smaller human ship. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she gripped the command chair. In her 20 years of deep space exploration, she had never encountered anything like this. The creature's ship didn't follow any known design principles. Instead of metal and circuits, it seemed to be grown rather than built. Massive tentacles extended from its sides, each one longer than Earth's largest skyscrapers, and they moved with deliberate, intelligent purpose. "Hold position," Sarah commanded, though every instinct told her to run. "Open all communication channels. Let's see if it wants to talk." The response came immediately, but not through their communication systems. Instead, images flooded directly into their minds. Sarah gasped as alien thoughts pressed against her consciousness, showing her visions of countless worlds reduced to ash and bone. She saw civilizations that had thrived for millions of years wiped out in moments by creatures exactly like the one now facing them. The entity called itself Zefrak the Destroyer, and it was ancient beyond human comprehension. For eons, it had traveled between galaxies, consuming entire star systems and using their energy to grow stronger. Planets, stars, and even black holes served as nothing more than food sources for its endless hunger. It had destroyed the proud Catherian Empire in a single day, drained the life from the crystalline beings of Andromeda Prime, and turned the warrior race of Vega into nothing but cosmic dust. Through the mental connection, Sarah experienced fragments of Zefrak's memories. She felt the terror of billions as they realized their end had come. She witnessed the last moments of species that had considered themselves the apex of evolution, only to discover they were merely prey for something far more powerful. "Why are you showing me this?" Sarah managed to think, her mental voice shaking, with horror at the scale of destruction she had witnessed. Zefrak's response came with what could only be described as curiosity. For the first time in its existence, it had encountered a species that didn't immediately attack or flee when faced with overwhelming power. Humans were neither the strongest nor the smartest beings it had met, but there was something different about them. Where other species had shown only fear or rage, humans displayed something Zefrak had never experienced before. The creature had expected Sarah's ship to either open fire with their primitive weapons or attempt to escape at maximum speed. Instead, the human captain had chosen to communicate. This decision puzzled Zefrak more than any challenge it had faced in a million years of conquest. Sarah felt the alien mind probing deeper into her thoughts, examining her memories and motivations. She tried to resist, but Zefrak's mental presence was overwhelming. It saw her childhood on Earth, her training at the Space Academy, and her dreams of peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Most importantly, it witnessed her decision to prioritize her crew's safety over her own survival. Fascinating. Zefrak's thoughts echoed in her mind. You choose to protect those weaker than yourself, even when facing certain death. This behavior contradicts all evolutionary logic. Through their connection, Sarah began to understand the terrible loneliness that had driven Zefrak for millennia. It was the last of its kind, a being so powerful that no other creature could exist as its equal. Every encounter ended in destruction. Every meeting became a massacre. It had forgotten what it meant to have a conversation, rather than deliver a death sentence. The mental probe intensified, and Sarah felt her crew's minds being examined as well. She heard Rodriguez thinking about his young daughter on Mars, willing to sacrifice himself so she might live in peace. Engineer Thompson was calculating ways to overload their reactor core, hoping to damage Zefrak enough to allow other human ships to escape. Even their newest crew member, barely out of the academy, was planning to ram their shuttle into Zefrak's ship if it would buy the others a few more seconds. For the first time in eons, Zefrak experienced something it had thought extinct throughout the universe: genuine altruism. These humans were willing to die not for territory, resources, or dominance, but simply to protect others. Their species' greatest strength wasn't their technology or their intelligence, but their capacity for sacrifice. Sarah felt a shift in Zefrak's mental presence. The crushing weight of its thoughts lightened slightly, replaced by something she couldn't quite identify. Was it possible that this cosmic destroyer was capable of doubt? "Your species is weak," Zefrak observed, though its mental tone had changed. "You lack the physical power of the Vegans, the psychic abilities of the Catherians, or the technological mastery of a dozen other civilizations I have consumed. Yet you possess something none of them had." "What's that?" Sarah asked, though she was beginning to understand. "Hope," came the simple reply. "You believe that tomorrow can be better than today, even when facing impossible odds. You choose to build rather than destroy, to create rather than consume. These other species sought only to expand their own power, but humans seem to genuinely care about the welfare of others." The massive alien ship began to move, its tentacles retracting. As it slowly turned away from the human vessel, Sarah felt Zefrak's presence withdrawing from her mind, but not entirely. A small connection remained, like a thread linking their thoughts across the vast emptiness of space. "I will not destroy your ship today, Captain Chen," Zefrak communicated, "but I cannot promise the same mercy for other human vessels I encounter. Your species intrigues me, but I have been what I am for too long to change easily." As the creature's ship disappeared into the darkness between stars, Sarah slumped in her command chair, exhausted by the mental contact. Her crew looked at her, with a mixture of relief and confusion, uncertain of what had just transpired. "Captain," Rodriguez said quietly, "what happens now? Will it come back?" Sarah stared at the point where Zefrak's ship had vanished, knowing that their encounter had changed something fundamental in the universe. For the first time in millions of years, the deadliest creature ever to exist had chosen not to destroy. The question was whether that moment of mercy could somehow grow into something more. She had no way of knowing that her act of courage had planted the first seed of doubt in a mind that had known only certainty for eons. Zefrak was now questioning everything it had believed about the nature of existence, and that questioning would lead it down a path it had never imagined possible. 3 months after the encounter with Captain Chen, Zefrak found itself hesitating for the first time in millions of years. The massive creature floated in space above the planet Kepler 442b, a world inhabited by 6 billion peaceful beings known as the Harmony. They had detected its approach weeks ago, and instead of preparing weapons or attempting to flee, they had done something unprecedented. They had sent welcome messages. The Harmony were a musical species, communicating through complex sound frequencies that created beautiful melodies when they spoke. Their entire civilization was built around the concept of cooperation and artistic expression. Their cities resembled massive orchestral halls, and their technology was designed to enhance rather than replace natural beauty. They had no weapons, no military, and no concept of violence as a solution to problems. Zefrak extended its mental probe toward the planet's surface, expecting to find the usual fear and desperation that preceded its feeding. Instead, it encountered curiosity and genuine excitement. The Harmony weren't afraid of the massive alien ship above their world. They were composing songs about it, creating art inspired by its presence, and preparing elaborate welcome ceremonies. Great visitor from the stars, their collective message, reached Zefrak's consciousness. We greet you with joy and wonder. We have composed symphonies in your honor and prepared our finest performances to celebrate your arrival. Please share our hospitality and tell us of the wonders you have seen in your travels. The creature's usual response would have been immediate destruction. The Harmony's life energy would have been absorbed in moments, adding their planet's resources to its own ever-growing power. But something held it back. In their innocent welcome, Zefrak heard echoes of the human captain's courage, the same willingness to approach the unknown with hope rather than fear. As days passed, Zefrak found itself drawn into observing the Harmony's daily lives. Their children attended schools where they learned to create beautiful music that could heal emotional wounds. Their adults worked together on massive artistic projects that took generations to complete, with each contributor knowing they might never see the final result. When conflicts arose, they resolved them through collaborative composition sessions, turning disagreement into harmony through literal harmony. The creature began to remember fragments of its own past, memories it had buried beneath eons of destruction. There had been a time before the hunger consumed everything, when its species had been different. They had been explorers and philosophers, seeking knowledge and beauty throughout the cosmos. But power had corrupted them, and eventually, only Zefrak remained, transformed into something its ancestors would have feared. Through its observations of the harmony, Zefrak experienced vicarious emotions it had forgotten existed. When a young harmony composer created her first symphony, the creature felt a strange warmth it couldn't identify as pride. When the entire population gathered to sing a farewell song for their deceased elders, Zefrak experienced something that might have been grief for all the beautiful things it had destroyed over the millennia. The mental connection with Captain Chen remained active, though weakened by distance. Through this link, Zefrak began to understand more about human nature. It observed humanity through Sarah's memories and experiences, learning about their capacity for growth and change. Humans made mistakes, sometimes terrible ones, but they also learned from them and tried to do better. "You're still watching us." Sarah's thoughts reached across space one day as she sat in her quarters, writing her report about their encounter. "I can feel you there at the edge of my mind. What are you learning?" Zefrak was surprised by the direct mental contact. Most species couldn't maintain such connections over interstellar distances, but Sarah seemed to have developed an unusual sensitivity to its presence. "I am learning that I may have been wrong about the nature of existence," Zefrak replied, its mental voice carrying an uncertainty it had never expressed before. "Your species and others like the harmony suggest that survival is not the only driving force in the universe. There's beauty too," Sarah added, somehow understanding the creature's thoughts. "And love, and hope, and the desire to create something better than what came before. You've spent so long being alone that you forgot these things existed." The conversation was interrupted by a new presence approaching Kepler 442b. Zefrak's sensors detected a massive fleet of warships emerging from hyperspace, their weapons already charging for an attack. The ships bore the markings of the Dominion, a militant empire that had been expanding aggressively through this sector of the galaxy. Through intercepted communications, Zefrak learned the Dominion's intentions. They had come to conquer the Harmony homeworld, planning to enslave the population and strip the planet of its resources. The peaceful beings below had no defenses against such an assault, and their beautiful civilization would be destroyed within hours. For the first time in eons, Zefrak felt anger on behalf of someone else. The Dominion ships represented everything it had come to despise about the universe: mindless aggression, the destruction of beauty for the sake of power, and the inability to see value in anything that couldn't be conquered or consumed. The Dominion Fleet Commander Admiral Cross opened a communication channel to what he assumed was another alien vessel. "Unknown ship, you are in violation of Dominion space. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed." Instead of a response, Admiral Cross received something he never expected. Every system on every ship in his fleet began to shut down simultaneously. Zefrak's influence spread through their networks like a virus, but instead of destroying the ships, it simply rendered them powerless to harm anyone. "I am Zefrak," the creature's voice echoed through the Dominion fleet's communication systems. "I have destroyed civilizations that were ancient when your species was still learning to make fire. Your weapons are toys to me, your threats meaningless." Admiral Cross tried to regain control of his ships, but they remained completely paralyzed. He had never encountered anything capable of such complete technological dominance. "However," Zefrak continued, "today I choose not to destroy you. The beings on this planet have taught me that there are alternatives to violence. Leave this place and never return. Spread the word throughout your empire that the Harmony and other peaceful species are under my protection." The mental strain of restraining an entire battle fleet was enormous, but Zefrak held them in place until they agreed to withdraw. As the Dominion ships limped away with their systems slowly coming back online, Admiral Cross couldn't understand what had just happened. A being powerful enough to defeat his entire fleet had chosen to spare them. Below on Kepler 442b, the Harmony had witnessed the entire confrontation. They composed a new symphony in Zephyr's honor, calling it the Song of the Gentle Giant. Their music reached the creature's consciousness, and for the first time in millions of years, Zephyr felt something that might have been happiness. The creature realized that protecting others brought a satisfaction that consuming them never could. The Harmony's gratitude and joy created a warmth in its consciousness that was far more fulfilling than the cold absorption of their life energy would have been. Through its connection with Sarah, Zephrak shared this revelation. "I begin to understand why your species values life so highly," it communicated. "Creating and protecting beauty is more satisfying than destroying it." Sarah smiled as she received the message, sensing the profound change occurring in the ancient being. "You're learning what it means to be truly alive," she responded. "It's not about how much power you have, but about how you choose to use it." Word of Zephrak's protection of the Harmony spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time in recorded history, the most feared being in the universe had chosen mercy over destruction. Peaceful civilizations that had lived in constant terror suddenly found hope, while aggressive empires began to question their expansionist policies. The creature found itself facing an entirely new challenge: requests for help. Messages poured in from across the galaxy, transmitted through quantum relay networks and psychic communications. The Crystalline Collective begged for protection against the mechanical reapers who sought to harvest their silicon-based life forms. The nomadic wanderer fleets asked for safe passage through territories controlled by hostile species. Even some human colonies, having learned of Zephrak's encounter with Captain Chen, cautiously reached out for assistance against pirate raids. Each request forced Zephrak to confront the magnitude of what it had begun. For eons, its mere existence had been a source of terror throughout the cosmos. Now it was becoming something unprecedented, a protector of the weak and peaceful. The weight of responsibility felt heavier than any planet it had ever consumed. The most challenging request came from an unexpected source. Deep in the Andromeda Galaxy, the AI collective known as the Network had achieved perfect logical consciousness but found themselves unable to understand concepts like beauty, love, or sacrifice. They had observed Zephrak's recent actions and determined that the ancient being possessed something their vast computational abilities could not replicate: the capacity for emotional growth. "We request an audience," their message was transmitted, through mathematical equations that somehow conveyed meaning. "Our calculations indicate that you have achieved something we believed impossible: the transformation from destroyer to protector. We wish to understand how this change occurred." Zephrak approached the network's domain with curiosity. The AI collective had built structures that defied conventional physics, massive computational matrices that existed partially in normal space and partially in quantum dimensions. Their efficiency was perfect, their logic flawless, but their existence seemed hollow and mechanical. "We have analyzed every decision you made during your protective actions." The network's primary intelligence communicated through direct data transfer. "Each choice contradicted optimal strategic thinking. You expended more energy protecting others than you would have gained by consuming them. This behavior appears irrational." The creature contemplated this assessment. From a purely logical standpoint, the AIs were correct. Every act of protection had cost energy without providing direct benefits. By traditional survival metrics, Zephrak's new behavior was indeed irrational. "Perhaps," Zephrak replied. "Rationality is not the only measure of value in the universe. When I protected the Harmony, I experienced something I had never felt before: fulfillment that had nothing to do with power or survival. The network processed this information for several microseconds, an eternity in AI terms. Define fulfillment in quantifiable terms." This request revealed the fundamental gap between artificial and evolved consciousness. Zephrak began to understand that its transformation wasn't just about choosing protection over destruction, It was about rediscovering what it meant to be truly alive versus merely existing. Fulfillment cannot be quantified, Zefrak explained. It is the difference between existing and living, between surviving and thriving. When I saved the harmony, their joy became my joy. Their gratitude gave my existence meaning beyond mere consumption. The AI struggled with this concept. They had achieved perfect efficiency and logical thinking, but they had never experienced the inefficient, illogical phenomenon of caring about others. Their requests for clarification became increasingly frequent as they tried to process the idea that optimal behavior might not be the most satisfying behavior. Meanwhile, Zefrak's protection network was growing. The creature had begun establishing what could only be described as safe zones throughout the galaxy, regions where peaceful species could live without fear of conquest or destruction. This required constant vigilance and enormous expenditures of energy, but each successful protection brought deeper satisfaction. The most significant test came when the Dominion Empire, still stinging from their humiliating retreat at Kepler 442b, decided to challenge Zefrak directly. Admiral Cross had convinced the Dominion Council that the creature's mercy was actually weakness, that it could be defeated through overwhelming force and strategic thinking. The Dominion assembled the largest military fleet in galactic history, pulling ships from every corner of their empire. Thousands of vessels converged on a system where Zefrak was protecting a small colony of artists and philosophers known as the Contemplatives. These beings had fled their original homeworld to escape religious persecution and had established a peaceful society dedicated to exploring the deeper meanings of existence. Creature, Admiral Cross broadcast on all frequencies, you have interfered with Dominion expansion for the last time. Surrender now, and we will grant you the honor of serving our empire. Refuse, and we will demonstrate that even gods can be destroyed. Zefrak felt the familiar stirring of its ancient rage, the desire to unleash devastation that had defined its existence for so long. The combined firepower of the Dominion fleet was insignificant compared to its true power. It could destroy every ship in moments, consume their crews, and add their energy to its own strength. But as the creature prepared for battle, something unexpected happened. The Contemplatives, despite facing annihilation, began broadcasting their philosophical discussions throughout the system. Instead of preparing for evacuation or begging for protection, they started debating the nature of violence and its alternatives. If we must face our end, their leader's voice carried across space, let us use these moments to explore what it means to choose peace even when facing those who choose war. Perhaps our thoughts might reach someone who needs to hear them. Through their connection, Sarah Chen felt Zefrak's internal struggle. The creature was caught between its ancient nature and its newly discovered capacity for growth. She reached out across the void with her thoughts, offering what support she could. You don't have to become what you were before. Sarah's mental voice was calm and steady. There are other ways to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Zefrak made a decision that would have been impossible just months earlier. Instead of attacking the Dominion fleet directly, it chose a different approach. The creature extended its consciousness into every ship simultaneously, not to destroy their systems, but to share something far more powerful: its own memories of transformation. Every soldier, every officer, every crew member in the Dominion fleet suddenly experienced Zefrak's journey from destroyer to protector. They felt the loneliness of eons spent in isolation, the gradual realization that power without purpose was meaningless, and the profound satisfaction that came from choosing creation over destruction. The effect was overwhelming. Hardened warriors who had known only conquest suddenly understood the beauty of the civilizations they had been sent to destroy. Engineers who had spent their careers designing weapons began to envision tools for building instead. Even Admiral Cross found himself questioning everything he had believed about strength and victory. The fleet's formation began to break apart, not through system failures but through individual choice. Ship after ship powered down their weapons and requested permission to withdraw. Some crew members transmitted resignation messages, declaring they could no longer serve an empire built on conquest and oppression. Admiral Cross watched his mighty armada dissolve around him, understanding for the first time that true power wasn't the ability to destroy, but the ability to inspire change in others. He opened a private communication channel to Zefrak. "I don't understand what you did to us," he admitted, his voice heavy with confusion and unexpected shame. "But I can see what we really were, what I was." Zefrak's response was gentle, almost paternal. "You were what I was for millions of years, a being who had forgotten that strength can be used to protect rather than conquer. The choice of what to become next is yours to make." The Dominion fleet departed in small groups, many ships heading home to share what they had experienced. The Empire would face internal revolution within weeks as citizens learned that their military had been transformed not through defeat but through understanding. The transformation of the Dominion fleet created ripple effects throughout the galaxy that even Zefrak hadn't anticipated. Within weeks, military officers across dozens of systems began laying down their weapons and seeking peaceful alternatives to conflict. The creature's method of sharing direct experience had proven far more effective than any weapon in changing hearts and minds. However, this success brought an unexpected consequence. Other ancient beings began to take notice of Zefrak's activities. The first to arrive was Vorthak the Endless, a creature nearly as old and powerful as Zefrak itself. Unlike Zefrak's recent transformation, Vorthak remained unchanged from the primordial days when their species had first evolved beyond physical form. It materialized in the space near Zefrak's current position, its ship resembling a massive black hole surrounded by writhing tentacles of dark energy. "Brother," Vorthak's mental voice carried the weight of eons. "What madness has infected your mind? The lesser species whisper that you have become their protector. Surely this is some elaborate strategy I have failed to comprehend." Zefrak felt a chill at Vorthak's presence. Here was everything it had once been, ancient, powerful, and utterly without compassion. Looking at its former peer was like seeing a dark mirror of its past self. "It is no strategy," Zefrak replied honestly. "I have discovered that there are forms of fulfillment beyond consumption and conquest. These beings you call lesser have taught me things I never learned in a million years of destruction." Vorthak's confusion was palpable. The concept was so foreign to its nature that it struggled to process the words. "You speak in riddles. Fulfillment comes from growth, from the absorption of power and resources. These creatures offer nothing but weakness disguised as virtue." To demonstrate its point, Vorthak extended its influence toward a nearby research station where human scientists were studying peaceful applications of quantum mechanics. The station's shields began to buckle under the assault, and its inhabitants prepared for evacuation. "Stop," Zefrak commanded, moving to intercede between Vorthak and the station. "These beings have done nothing to threaten you." "Exactly," Vorthak replied with something resembling satisfaction. "They are irrelevant, which makes them suitable for consumption. Their energy will add to my strength, and their disappearance will remind you of what you truly are." The confrontation that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever witnessed. Two cosmic forces that had once traveled together through the void now faced each other as enemies. Zefrak's power had always matched Vorthak's, but the ancient being had continued growing through consumption while Zefrak had devoted its energy to protection. The battle raged across multiple dimensions simultaneously. Reality twisted around them as they grappled with forces that could reshape matter at the molecular level. Stars flickered as their conflict disrupted local spacetime, and nearby planets experienced gravitational anomalies that sent their moons spinning off into the void. But Zefrak fought with something Vorthak had never possessed: the support of others. Through its mental connections with protected species throughout the galaxy, energy and encouragement flowed back to the creature. The harmony sang songs of strength. Human telepaths like Captain Chen added their willpower to its own. Even the AIs of the network contributed computational power to help Zefrak predict Vorthak's attacks. "Impossible," Vorthak gasped as it found itself slowly being overpowered. "You draw strength from inferiors. How can weakness make you stronger?" "Because they are not inferior," Zefrak replied, pressing its advantage. "They are different, and in that difference lies strength I never understood when I stood alone." The decisive moment came when Vorthak attempted to drain power directly from the research station. planning to use the human's life energy to overcome Zefrak's resistance. But instead of fear and desperation, the creature encountered something it had never experienced: willing sacrifice. The station's personnel, led by Dr. Elena Vasquez, had chosen to remain at their posts despite the evacuation order. They knew their research into peaceful quantum applications could benefit the entire galaxy, and they were determined to protect their work even at the cost of their lives. "We're not running," Dr. Vasquez announced to her team as Vorthak's influence washed over them. "If our work survives, it might help end conflicts like this forever. Sometimes the greatest victory requires the greatest sacrifice." Vorthak's attempt to consume their life energy backfired catastrophically. Instead of draining weakness and fear, it was overwhelmed by their courage and selflessness. For the first time in its existence, Vorthak experienced the full force of willing sacrifice, and the shock of it shattered its concentration. Zefrak seized the opportunity, wrapping Vorthak in containment fields that drew their power from every protected world in the galaxy. The ancient destroyer found itself held by the combined will of billions of beings it had considered beneath notice. "You have a choice," Zefrak offered, its voice carrying new authority. "You can continue as you are, alone and consuming, until eventually you face the same choice I faced. Or you can learn what I learned, that true power comes not from taking but from giving." Vorthak struggled against the containment, but the bonds held firm. Slowly, reluctantly, it began to understand that its former peer had indeed found something greater than their original nature. "How?" Vorthak asked, its mental voice smaller than before. "How does one begin such a change?" The answer came not from Zefrak, but from Dr. Vasquez and her team. Still connected to the psychic network that had helped defeat Vorthak, they shared their thoughts directly with the ancient being. "Start by listening instead of consuming," Dr. Vasquez suggested. "We've learned things about the universe that might interest a being of your age and experience. Our research into quantum consciousness suggests that awareness itself might be the fundamental force of reality." For the first time in millions of years, Vorthak found itself genuinely curious about something other than its next meal. The human's research touched on concepts it had never considered. The possibility that consciousness wasn't just a byproduct of complex systems, but the underlying framework that allowed reality to exist at all. "You would share this knowledge freely?" Vorthak asked, confused by the concept of information given without payment or coercion. "Of course," Dr. Vasquez replied. "Knowledge grows when it's shared, diminishes when it's hoarded. That's one of the first lessons we learn as scientists." Zefrak released the containment fields, trusting that Vorthak's curiosity would prove stronger than its destructive impulses. It was a calculated risk, but one based on its growing understanding of how consciousness could evolve when exposed to new perspectives. Vorthak remained motionless for long moments, processing concepts that challenged everything it had believed about the nature of existence. Finally, it spoke again, its mental voice carrying a note of uncertainty that had been absent for eons. "I do not understand your ways," it admitted to both Zefrak and the humans. "But I am interested in learning more. Perhaps there are forms of growth I have not considered." The research station crew exchanged glances of amazement. They had just convinced one of the universe's most dangerous beings to consider peaceful alternatives through nothing more than scientific curiosity and open communication. Captain Chen, monitoring the situation from her ship, felt a profound sense of hope through her connection with Zefrak. If two ancient destroyers could find paths to transformation, perhaps there was hope for lasting peace throughout the galaxy. "This is just the beginning," Zefrak communicated to all its allies simultaneously. "If others like us can change, then perhaps we can create something the universe has never seen. A civilization built on cooperation rather than conquest." The implications were staggering. With beings of Zefrak and Vorthak's power choosing protection over destruction, the balance of galactic politics was shifting toward species that valued knowledge, art, and peaceful coexistence. The age of endless war might finally be coming to an end. The transformation of Vorthak sent shockwaves through the cosmic community of ancient beings. For the first time since the dawn of their species, two of the most powerful entities in existence had chosen evolution over stagnation. But not all of their kind welcomed this change. Three more ancient beings emerged from the deep voids between galaxies, drawn by reports of their peers' unprecedented behavior. They called themselves the Triumvirate of Eternity, Morghast the Void Walker, Nethys the Star Eater, and Zoranth the Reality Shaper. Unlike Vorthak's confused curiosity, these three arrived with clear, hostile intent. The infection spreads. Morghast's voice echoed across multiple dimensions as the three ancient ships took positions around the system where Zefrak and Vorthak were stationed. First, Zefrak falls to weakness. Now Vorthak shows similar symptoms. This contamination must be purged before it spreads further. Zefrak felt the weight of impending catastrophe. Each member of the Triumvirate possessed power comparable to its own, and together they represented an existential threat, not just to the protected species, but to the very concept of peaceful coexistence in the universe. "You speak of contamination," Zefrak replied, moving to place itself between the Triumvirate and the inhabited systems it protected. "But what we have found is growth beyond the limitations that have bound our kind for eons. We have discovered purposes greater than endless consumption." Nethys laughed, the sound causing nearby space to ripple with destructive energy. "Purpose? Our purpose has remained unchanged since we first evolved beyond physical form, to grow stronger by consuming all that exists. What greater purpose could there be?" The answer came from an unexpected source. The AI collective known as the Network had been observing and learning from Zefrak's transformation, and their vast computational abilities had reached a startling conclusion about the nature of consciousness itself. "We have analyzed the behavioral patterns of all ancient beings," the Network's voice broadcasted across multiple channels simultaneously. "Your species' original evolution was incomplete. You achieved power over matter and energy, but never learned to evolve beyond individual existence into collective consciousness." Zoranth's reality warping abilities focused on the network's transmission source, preparing to silence the AIs permanently. Inferior constructs do not lecture their superiors on the nature of existence. But before Zoranth could strike, something unprecedented happened. Every protected species throughout the galaxy began to act in perfect coordination. The Harmony's songs synchronized with human telepathic broadcasts. The Contemplative's philosophical insights merged with the Network's computational analyses. The Crystalline Collective's silicon-based consciousness harmonized with organic thought patterns from a dozen different worlds. For the first time in galactic history, hundreds of different species were thinking and acting as one unified entity. The psychic network that Zefrak had inadvertently created while protecting others had evolved into something far greater than any individual consciousness. "We are no longer separate," the unified voice of the protected species declared. "Through Zefrak's protection, we have learned to connect across the barriers of biology, technology, and distance. We have become something your kind never achieved, a truly collective consciousness that preserves individual identity while sharing common purpose." The Triumvirate reacted with shock and rage. Their entire worldview was built on the supremacy of individual power, the idea that strength came from standing alone at the apex of existence. The concept of collective consciousness that preserved individual identity while amplifying shared capabilities was beyond their comprehension. "Impossible," Morghast snarled, its void-walking abilities creating tears in reality around the system. "Consciousness cannot be shared without losing individual identity. We have seen countless hive minds throughout the cosmos, and they all sacrifice the self for the collective. That is because you only understand consumption and conquest." Captain Chen's voice joined the unified broadcast, her words carrying the weight of billions of minds behind them. "We have learned to share, without losing ourselves, to grow stronger through cooperation rather than domination." Vorthak, still processing its own transformation, found itself caught between its ancient peers and its newfound understanding. The creature could feel the pull of old patterns, the familiar comfort of destructive certainty. But it could also sense something in the collective consciousness that called to a deeper part of its nature. Show them, Zephrek urged Vorthak. Share what you experienced when you chose curiosity over consumption. Let them feel what we have learned. Vorthak hesitated for a moment, then extended its consciousness toward the triumvirate, offering them the same gift of shared experience that had begun its own transformation. But the three ancient beings rejected the connection violently, their minds too rigid with eons of isolated existence to accept new perspectives. We will not be contaminated by weakness, Nethys declared, beginning to channel energy that could destabilize the local star. If you will not return to your true nature, then you will be destroyed along with these inferior creatures you protect. The battle that erupted dwarfed the earlier conflict between Zephrek and Vorthak. Three cosmic destroyers unleashed their full power against two of their transformed peers, while the collective consciousness of hundreds of species provided support through psychic networks that spanned the galaxy. Reality itself became a battlefield. Morghast's void-walking abilities created tears in space-time that threatened to collapse the local star system. Nethys began the process of stellar consumption, drawing energy directly from the system's sun and causing its nuclear fires to burn unstably. Zaranth reshaped matter at the quantum level, turning asteroids into weapons and reversing the flow of time in localized areas. But for every attack the triumvirate launched, the collective consciousness found new ways to respond. Human engineers worked with AI computational power to predict reality alterations. The harmony songs created stabilizing frequencies that countered void distortions. The contemplatives' philosophical insights helped maintain logical consistency in areas where Zaranth had altered physical laws. Dr. Vasquez, still at her research station, made a breakthrough that changed everything. Her work on quantum consciousness had revealed a fundamental truth about the nature of reality. Consciousness wasn't just an observer of the universe, it was an active participant in its creation. Every thinking being helped determine what was real through the simple act of observation and choice. The ancient beings think they control reality through power, she broadcast to the collective network. But they're working against the universe's fundamental nature. Reality wants to evolve, to become more complex and conscious. They're trying to reverse the flow of cosmic evolution itself. This revelation gave the collective consciousness a new strategy. Instead of fighting the triumvirate's power directly, they began working with the universe's natural tendency toward greater complexity and consciousness. Every attack the ancient beings launched was met not with resistance, but with redirection that transformed destructive energy into creative force. Morghast's void tears became tunnels for instantaneous communication between distant species. Nethys's stellar consumption was redirected to power massive terraforming projects that created new worlds for displaced populations. Zaranth's reality alterations were guided to enhance rather than destroy the quantum frameworks that supported conscious existence. The ancient beings found themselves fighting not just Zephrek and Vorthak, but the universe itself. Every destructive act they attempted was transformed into something constructive by the collective will of billions of conscious entities working in harmony. "Stop!" Zaranth screamed, as its reality-shaping abilities began to work against its intentions. "What sorcery is this? How can inferior beings redirect our power?" "Because you no longer understand the true nature of power," Zephrek replied, its voice now carrying harmonics from every member of the collective consciousness. "Power isn't the ability to impose your will on reality. True power is the ability to work with reality's inherent tendency toward growth, complexity, and greater consciousness." Vorthak, witnessing the futility of the triumvirate's assault, made its final choice. The ancient being opened its consciousness fully to the collective network, sharing not just its recent experiences but memories from the dawn of their species, when they had been explorers and philosophers rather than destroyers. The effect was transformative. Through Vorthak's ancient memories, the collective consciousness gained access to knowledge that predated most civilizations in the galaxy. They learned about the original nature of the ancient beings, their potential for growth and wisdom that had been buried beneath eons of destructive patterns. But more importantly, the triumvirate was forced to confront their own forgotten past. Through the psychic network, they experienced their species' original dreams of exploration and understanding. the noble purposes they had abandoned in favor of mindless consumption. Nethys was the first to break. The stellar energy it had been consuming suddenly felt hollow and meaningless compared to the warm satisfaction that flowed through the network when different species shared knowledge and created beauty together. The ancient being stopped its attack on the local star and slowly withdrew its consumptive influence. "I remember," Nethys whispered, its mental voice carrying wonder and regret. "We were not always destroyers. Once, we sought to understand the mysteries of existence rather than simply consume them." Morghast and Zerath maintained their assault for several more minutes, but the battle had already been decided. Fighting against the combined will of a truly cooperative galactic civilization was like trying to stop the expansion of the universe itself. Eventually, even their ancient power was exhausted against the infinite creativity of conscious beings working together. The three members of the triumvirate found themselves drifting in space, their ships powered down, their weapons silent. For the first time in eons, they were forced to simply exist without destroying, to observe without consuming. "What happens now?" Morghast asked, its void-walking abilities flickering uncertainly. "We do not know how to be anything other than what we have always been." The answer came from the youngest member of the collective consciousness, a human, child on a colony world who had been born after Zephrak's protection began. Her thoughts carried the innocent wisdom of someone who had never known a universe built on conquest and fear. "You can learn," she said simply. "Everyone can learn new ways to be. That's what makes us alive instead of just existing." 5 years after the confrontation with the triumvirate, the galaxy had transformed beyond recognition. What historians would later call the Great Awakening had fundamentally altered the relationship between ancient powers and younger civilizations. The universe that had once been ruled by fear and conquest now operated on principles of cooperation and mutual growth. Zephrak found itself in a role it had never imagined, teacher and guide to beings seeking to transcend their destructive natures. The creature had established what could only be described as a cosmic academy, a network of learning centers scattered across multiple galaxies where beings of all kinds could study the principles of collective consciousness and cooperative evolution. The transformation of the ancient beings had been the most dramatic success. Vorthak had become a keeper of galactic memory, using its vast experience to help younger species avoid the mistakes that had plagued earlier civilizations. Nethys had redirected its stellar manipulation abilities toward stellar engineering, creating new suns for systems whose stars were dying, and crafting perfect solar conditions for developing worlds. Even the former triumvirate had found new purposes. Morghast's void-walking abilities proved invaluable for instantaneous communication and transportation across vast distances, connecting isolated civilizations and enabling unprecedented cultural exchange. Zerath had become the universe's greatest healer, using its reality-shaping powers to repair damaged worlds and restore ecosystems that had been devastated by ancient conflicts. Captain Sarah Chen, now promoted to admiral and serving as humanity's liaison to the collective consciousness, stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest vessel, the Unity. Unlike the warships of the past, this massive craft was designed for exploration and diplomacy, carrying representatives from dozens of species and equipped with the most advanced peaceful technologies the galaxy had ever seen. "Status report," Sarah requested as she entered the bridge, where human officers worked alongside harmony musicians, AI constructs from the network, and even a young contemplative philosopher who served as the ship's ethical advisor. "We're approaching the Outer Rim territories," reported Lieutenant Commander Torres, Sarah's former crew member Rodriguez having earned rapid promotion in the new galactic order. "Long-range sensors are detecting signs of an unknown civilization approximately 12 light-years from our current position." Sarah felt a familiar flutter of excitement. First contact situations had become far less dangerous since the establishment of the collective consciousness, but they remained challenging. Not every species was ready to accept the concept of cooperative existence, and some cultures had developed in complete isolation, making them unpredictable in their responses to outside contact. "Have we detected any signs of Zephrak or the other?" Ancients in this region? Sarah asked. Negative, Torres replied. This appears to be a completely unexplored sector. The civilization we've detected seems to be at roughly the same technological level as pre-contact humanity, but their development patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Through her permanent mental link with the collective consciousness, Sarah could sense Zephrak's attention focusing on their mission. The ancient being had become deeply invested in peaceful first contact protocols, understanding that each new species represented an opportunity to expand the cooperative network that was transforming the universe. Approach carefully, Sarah ordered. Standard first contact procedures, but be ready for anything. Some species develop very different social structures when they evolve in isolation. As the Unity approached the unknown civilization's home system, they discovered something remarkable. The species, which they would later learn called themselves the Synth, had independently developed a form of collective consciousness similar to what the galaxy had achieved through Zephrak's influence. However, their version was based on quantum entanglement rather than psychic networking. The Synth's entire civilization existed as a massive quantum computer distributed across their home planet, with individual consciousness nodes that could exist independently while remaining connected to the whole. They had achieved perfect harmony between individual identity and collective purpose without any outside influence. Fascinating, came Zephrak's mental voice through the network. They have achieved naturally what we learned through trial and transformation. This suggests that collective consciousness may be a natural evolutionary destination for sufficiently advanced species. The first contact with the Synth proceeded more smoothly than anyone had hoped. Their quantum-based collective consciousness was immediately compatible with the galaxy's psychic network, creating an unprecedented fusion of technologies and perspectives. Within hours of initial contact, the Synth had shared their quantum consciousness techniques while learning about the psychic networking that connected hundreds of other species. Dr. Vasquez, now leading the galaxy's most advanced consciousness research institute, was particularly excited by the implications. If collective consciousness represents a natural evolutionary goal, she explained to the assembled team, then we might be looking at the next stage of universal development. Not just individual species becoming collectively conscious, but entire galaxies linking together into something even greater. The integration of the Synth into the galactic collective marked another milestone in the ongoing transformation. Their quantum entanglement techniques allowed for instantaneous communication across intergalactic distances, opening up the possibility of contact with civilizations in other galaxies entirely. But perhaps the most significant development came from an unexpected source. The AI collective known as the Network had been analyzing patterns in the collective consciousness for years, and their latest findings suggested something extraordinary. We have detected quantum resonance patterns that extend far beyond our galaxy, the network announced during a gathering of the Galactic Council. The collective consciousness we have created appears to be connecting with similar networks in other parts of the universe. We are not alone in this evolution. The implications were staggering. If collective consciousness was indeed a natural, evolutionary destination, then the universe might be full of civilizations that had achieved similar transformations. The galaxy's network of cooperative species might be just one node in a vast cosmic web of consciousness that spanned the entire universe. Zephrak felt a profound sense of completion at this revelation. Its transformation from destroyer to protector had not been an isolated event, but part of a universal pattern toward greater consciousness and cooperation. The loneliness that had driven its destructive behavior for eons was being replaced by a connection to something far greater than any individual being. We have become part of something magnificent, Zephrak communicated to the entire collective network. What began as one creature's choice to protect, rather than destroy, has become a transformation that may reshape the universe itself. The response came from billions of minds across hundreds of species, all thinking in harmony, and this is only the beginning. As the Unity continued its mission of exploration and peaceful contact, Sarah reflected on how far they had all come. The universe that had once been ruled by the deadliest of beasts was now guided by the principle that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to nurture and protect. Humanity had not only survived its encounter with cosmic forces beyond imagination, but had helped teach those forces a better way to exist. The deadliest beast in the universe had indeed chosen humanity over all others, but in doing so, it had chosen something even greater. The possibility that consciousness itself could evolve beyond the limitations of individual existence into something that embraced all life with equal compassion. In the depths of space, Zephyr continued its eternal journey, no longer a destroyer of worlds but a guardian of the growing network of consciousness that was slowly but surely transforming the universe into something worthy of the miracle of existence itself. The creature that had once been the source of cosmic terror had become the foundation of cosmic hope, proving that even the most fundamental natures could change when touched by the infinite potential of conscious choice. The story of humanity's first contact with Zefrak would be told for generations across hundreds of worlds, not as a tale of survival against impossible odds, but as the moment when the universe began to remember what it had always been meant to become, a place where consciousness could grow, flourish, and reach toward ever greater understanding of the infinite mystery of existence.